At 4:30 in the morning, on April 15, 1912, the ship Carpathia appeared near lifeboat D. Lolo and his brother Monmon were pulled aboard the ship in a potato sack. The boys didn't know their last name. They were only known as the sons of Mr. Hoffmann. Only Hoffmann wasn't his real name. In reality, his name was Michel Navratil, and he had tried to kidnap his two sons to New York. The lookout, Frederick Fleet, rings the alarm bell 3 times on April 14th at around 11:40 p.m. The Titanic turns, but on its voyage from Southampton to New York, it is traveling too fast and has already come too close to the cold Colossus. At full cruising speed, she scrapes starboard along the iceberg. The engines are stopped, and the Titanic lies peacefully on the surface of the water. But the silence is deceptive. The Titanic has leaked. 6 of its 16 watertight segments are flooded. The bow begins to sink. The sea makes its way through portholes, hatches, and ventilation shafts. The front part of the ship plunges further and further into the water, and at around 2:20 a.m., the hull can no longer withstand the increasing forces and breaks between the 3rd and 4th chimney. The Titanic sinks into the icy Atlantic Ocean near Newfoundland, the stern pointing steeply upwards. At a speed of up to 80 kilometers per hour, it hits at a depth of more than 3,800 meters and bores up to 15 meters into the mud. Mr. Hoffmann, a wealthy master tailor from Nice, passes his 2 sons, Lolo and Monmon, through the cordon. They are put into folding boat D, the 9th and final life-saving vessel that was lowered from the ship's port side. And now, it's full. He calls out to the almost 4-year-old Lolo, "My child, tell your mother that I loved her with all my heart and that I still do." Mr. Hoffmann died that night along with around 1,500 other people. Only Hoffmann wasn't his real name. In reality, his name was Michel Navratil, and he had tried to kidnap his sons Lolo and Monmon and escape with them to New York. Michel came from Slovakia and lived in Nice with his wife, the Argentine Marcel, and their 2 children. But Marcel had an affair with her husband's best friend and godfather of Lolo, the much older Comte Rey de la Villaret. For him she separated from her husband Michel. The divorce was filed. A judge temporarily transferred custody of the children to Marcel's brother, who in turn left the care of the children to the mother. Michel could only see his sons on Sundays, an unbearable condition for him. He borrowed the passport of his friend Louis M. Hoffmann and booked a second-class ticket for a trip across the Atlantic under his name, where he intended to build a new life with his sons. The body of Mr. Michel Navratil was among those recovered from the ocean. He never wanted to see Marcel again, so it was written in a letter that was found in his grey coat after his death. In the other pocket was his pipe and a loaded revolver. The love greetings that he gave Lolo in the face of his own death sprang from a moment of remorse for what he had done to Marcel. His granddaughter Elizabeth is sure of that. In the meantime, the water had also got into the lifeboat. Lolo's feet were already very cold. He was sitting next to a banker's daughter from America, and the puppy was trembling on her lap. The boy looked out at the black ocean, on which huge chunks of ice floated. Then he fell asleep. When he woke at 4:30 in the morning, the ship Carpathia which had received the distress signal from the Titanic, was approaching the lifeboat. Lolo and his brother were pulled aboard the ship in a potato sack. The French-speaking boys didn't understand English and didn't know their last name. They were only known as the sons of Mr. Hoffmann and called by the nicknames Lolo and Monmon. And now, they had become the orphans of the Titanic. Meanwhile, a wealthy French-speaking passenger took the children into her New York apartment. Within just one day, the nice old lady had received more than 30 adoption requests. One letter, it is said, came from Florette Guggenheim, the widow of the wealthy businessman Benjamin Guggenheim. And Mr. Frank Lefebvre travelled from Iowa to New York, mistakenly assuming that Lolo and Monmon were his sons. The Titanic had torn his wife Marie and all of his 4 children to their deaths. In the photo, which now went around the world, the two were sitting in a huge wing chair, Lolo with a toy steamer on his lap. Marcel, who had not received any news from Michel and the children since the kidnapping, discovered the photo in the French newspaper Le Figaro and got in touch with the American consulate. Together with other relatives, she travelled from France to New York on the Oceanic, which was known as the widow's ship. There, she was finally able to take Lolo and Monmon into her arms under the strict eyes of the American Children's Aid Society, a kind of child protection association. She separated from her lover. Marcel had remorse and blamed him for the failure of her marriage. The story is true, only that it remains a mystery why the father, Michel Navratil, could not save himself. After all, he was a second-class passenger and they were allowed to get into a lifeboat at the beginning of the evacuation. If Michel had come to the bridge 2 minutes earlier, he would probably have survived. Then he and his children would have been let into the last lifeboat, says his granddaughter Elizabeth Navratil, who wrote a book about the sinking of the Titanic. She suspects that while the children slept in their cabin, Michel visited friends in 3rd grade and was locked there. It was only when the doors of this lowest class to the upper deck were open again that he came out and was able to wake his children. Indeed, this is the only meaningful explanation for his late arrival on the upper deck, because, unlike the 3rd-class passengers, the 1st and 2nd-class passengers had access to the lifeboats from the start of the evacuation. Their loading should, however, have followed a system in which 3rd-class passengers could still have boarded. The boats should be lowered slowly from the 1st class and pick up 2nd and 3rd-class passengers on the way down. But because the captain had failed to practice this maneuver with the crew, the lifeboats did not stop in either the 2nd or 3rd class, but were lowered into the water half empty. The 3rd-class passengers were also initially locked on the lower decks, which either by mistake or because it was thought that the people below could get on the lifeboats. Lolo, whose real name was named after his father Michel, later became a professor of philosophy in Montpellier and wrote to the Titanic International Society in 1991. I remember very well the night the Titanic sank. I slept in our cabin and so did my brother. My father woke us up. He was with a man I didn't know. He picked me up and carried me to the bridge, and his companion carried my brother. Then the 2 men put us in a lifeboat that was almost full. My father told me to tell my mother how much he loved her, and then he would have to part with us. I didn't know that I wouldn't see him again. When his daughter Elizabeth accompanied him to the cinema, when James Cameron's film Titanic was shown, the 88-year-old man trembled in her arms for half an hour. Michel Marcel Navratil passed away at the age of 92 in 2001. According to the Titanic Historical Society, he was the last male Titanic survivor. His younger brother, Edmund, joined the French troops during World War II. He did not reach longevity like his brother. During the war, he was held captive in an enemy camp but eventually fled. His health worsened in the years after the war, and he passed away at age 43.